Hi everyone, it's Dr. Hansen. I wanted to talk to you today about psychological disorders and the criteria for different disorders. So to start, there are a lot of different behaviors that we may think are symptoms of disorders, but in order to qualify for any disorder, there are certain criteria that have to be met according to the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. We're currently on the 5th edition. So the criteria are that it has to prevent the person from normal everyday functioning, so it's maladaptive. It has to cause distress, and it has to deviate from accepted social norms. So this varies from culture to culture, and that impacts what is diagnosed. The first category we'll talk about are anxiety disorders, and there are different disorders under this category. So the first is generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD. This is when the person just has free-floating anxiety with no real cause that we know of. So this person is anxious from the moment they wake up in the morning until when they go to bed at night. When they wake up, they're worried about everything that's going to happen that day. They may go through what they have to do that day and get worried about it and feel just this sense of uneasiness all the time. And then at night, they play back everything that happened that day and worry about things they said and did and what didn't get accomplished, and they just don't feel calm, but there's no one source. The second is panic disorder. Panic disorder involves regular panic attacks. Panic attacks feel a lot like a heart attack. In fact, all ERs around the country get people coming in regularly, typically on a daily basis, for a heart attack. They think they're having a heart attack because their heart is racing. They may have passed out, they're dizzy, they're breaking out into a cold sweat, they may feel tingles in their arms or their legs, high blood pressure, and in fact, it's actually an anxiety attack sometimes. So these panic attacks or anxiety attacks can come on at any time, and a panic disorder involves not only the panic attacks, but also the constant worry of when the next one will be, the anticipatory anxiety surrounding having regular panic attacks. Phobic disorder. A phobia is very different than a typical fear. So you might be afraid of snakes, for example. That's a normal fear. Snakes, spiders, heights, these are things that people are afraid of sometimes, and that's normal. That does not deviate from accepted social norms, as we talked about before. But if I'm driving down the road and I see a snake on my way to work, and then every day after that, for the rest of my life, I refuse to drive on that road again, and I take an extra 20 minutes to get to my job because I can't go on that one road, that would qualify as a phobia because it's interfering with my daily life. It's really causing a disruption in my life. So it's more than just a regular fear. OCD is a disorder that often is thrown around casually in conversation. People will say, oh, I'm really OCD. I like things neat and tidy. That's not what OCD is at all. OCD can be a debilitating, awful disorder. It involves two components: obsessions, which are very intrusive thoughts, and then the subsequent behaviors to try to reduce the obsessions. So there are different themes with OCD. One is cleanliness. And if I had OCD and I'm sitting at a desk right now, I would be concerned about all the germs that might be on my desk. And I would disinfect with one of those wipes. I would go wash my hands, and as I'm talking to you, I wouldn't be able to continue a dialogue with you because I'd be so obsessively worried about germs. I'd have to get up repeatedly to wash my hands, and oftentimes people with OCD who do have that particular theme have just sores all over their hands because they have washed them so much that they're cracked and dry and have bled. So if you're organized, it definitely does not mean that you have OCD, and it is a really serious disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, is the inability to move forward from a traumatic event. So an example would be, we always think about veterans with PTSD because the rates are very high, especially returning from war. But it can be any trauma. It can be a rape, an assault, natural disaster, a bad car accident, witnessing someone's death. Any trauma at all can result in PTSD. So the symptoms would be flashbacks, problem sleeping, again, an inability to move forward from a really traumatic event. Mood disorders. We're going to talk about two different mood disorders today. The first is major depression. Someone with major depression often has a feeling of hopelessness, that things are not going to get better for them. They don't see the light at the end of the tunnel and oftentimes have suicidal tendencies. So, depression is on a continuum. We can be mildly depressed all the way to major depression. And someone who's mildly depressed can typically pull through on their own without medication. So, we've all felt down sometimes. It might be tied to a situation or death of a loved one or something, and we grieve and we're able to move forward and process it. But with someone with major depression, feels so hopeless. They struggle to get out of bed. They might be sleeping for 16 hours a day, really unable to engage in hobbies, and then again have the suicidal tendencies. Bipolar disorder involves all of that, but there's another component called mania. And during mania, the person feels elated, they feel on top of the world, and they may not sleep. Sometimes people who are going through a major manic episode will wind up in jail or institutionalized because they break laws, like minor things, usually like trespassing or shoplifting or something. But they act in a way that is completely unusual for their personality. So they might become very promiscuous, for example, during mania. I had one client who spent her entire life savings on a shopping spree at the mall. I know someone else who sent over $100,000 to a Nigerian scam because she thought she was, marrying this person and he was the love of her life, just behaving really erratically and irresponsibly. This affects 1 to 2.5% of the population as equal among men and women, whereas depression is twice as common in women than in men. Schizophrenia involves hallucinations and delusions. The hallucinations are typically auditory, so hearing voices, and delusions can follow different themes. So one delusion is a delusion of persecution, as is the case for a paranoid schizophrenic. They think people are out to get them. Another type of delusion is a delusion of grandeur. So they think that they're on a mission from someone, sometimes a higher power. They're more important than everyone else, and they just have this sense of grandeur. Schizophrenia typically involves disorganized thoughts, and it's difficult to follow conversation with someone who is schizophrenic without medication because their language is all over the place. So you could be talking about one topic, and you're still on that topic, but they've moved on to 10 others, and you don't know where they are or what they're talking about by the end. Because they also have attention problems, it may be hard for them to understand you and have a dialogue with you. What I really want to reiterate with schizophrenia, though, is that people with schizophrenia who are on medication and receiving therapy can do fine in society, and medications are very helpful. So sometimes you may know someone with schizophrenia without even having any clue that they have this disorder because it is treatable. Some of the symptoms are emotional disturbances like a flat affect. So you might tell someone something and they don't seem to respond at all. Their face doesn't change. Their voice doesn't change. It's monotone. Or they may have inappropriate emotions. So you tell them something sad and they start laughing. Or you tell them something funny and they start crying. They can have social withdrawal because it is difficult for them to communicate with others. So it's important to keep that in mind. And again, medication and therapy can be really, really helpful with schizophrenia. One of the problems is that people with schizophrenia can get treatment and it works so well that they go off the medication because they don't want the side effects of the medication. And then, they have all these symptoms all over again. So they have to stay on their medication. Personality disorders are long-standing, inflexible, maladaptive ways of behaving. So I'm going to talk to you about a few of these, and the first one is antisocial personality disorder. Antisocial personality disorder sort of confuses people because antisocial in this case does not mean that they are isolating themselves or don't have friends or anything like that. What it means is that they are highly manipulative, so they actually can be very charming. And people don't realize that from the name, but they can be extremely charming, and they can be con artists. They don't have meaningful, deep relationships, and they don't typically connect easily with others. So that's why it's antisocial personality disorder. They're not having those deep social connections. They can be impulsive, callous, manipulative, aggressive. They have irresponsible behavior. They don't accept social norms. They have problems with authority. And they rarely feel remorse for anything that they do. With this disorder, they tend to begin criminal activity at an early age, and if someone has these symptoms and they're under 18, they could be diagnosed with something called conduct disorder, which is all the same symptoms, but they're under 18. Over 18, then they might meet diagnostic criteria for antisocial personality disorder. This is much more common in males, affecting 3 to 6% of males and 1% of females. A lot of the research that we get from antisocial personality disorder actually comes from the prison system because they are so likely to commit crimes. So many people with APD have spent some time in jail or prison. Narcissistic personality disorder is when the person has an inflated sense of self-importance and a need for admiration. And I think this is becoming more common in the age of social media. So, we're posting everything online now. We're cooking dinner, doing laundry, and, logically, no one cares about that. But when you have an audience, and it's not even really an imagined audience, you have a real audience online, your friends list, then you have this increased elevated sense of self-importance. So it'll be interesting to see the research in the coming years as a result of social media. The prevalence rate is low, it's less than 1%. However, the prevalence rate is most likely incorrect because people who think they're perfect already don't really seek treatment. So it's hard to get a true number on narcissistic personality disorder because we all know a narcissist. Borderline personality disorder is the only one of the three that we've talked about that is more common in women than in men. And it's a difficulty controlling emotions. It involves anger, impulsivity, mood swings. Some people do confuse this for bipolar disorder, but bipolar disorder does not involve rapid mood swings in most cases. It's, longer periods of mania and depression, whereas with borderline, the person really can be happy one minute and furious the next. So it's a more rapid cycle of mood swings, and it also involves inappropriate interpersonal relationships. So this type of person does not understand boundaries. They'll ask you ridiculous questions that are just inappropriate, and all of their relationships are very volatile. So they have problems with their spouse, problems with their parents, problems with everyone. There's a 5 to 6% prevalence rate, and it is more common in women than in men. Fortunately, though, many women who are going through this do want treatment because they realize that it's causing problems in their interpersonal relationships. I hope this was helpful to you, and if you have any questions, please let me know.